Imagine this. The year is Lingwu, a small office in the quiet city of Bern, Switzerland. The room is simple. No expensive furniture. No famous scientists. No cheering crowds. Just shelves filled with papers. The soft sound of clocks ticking. And one young man sitting alone at a wooden desk. He is not a university professor. He is not a rich inventor. He is not even famous. He is simply a patent clerk, checking other people's ideas all day long. In his hand, he holds a pen. On the paper before him are a few strange equations. Nobody around him knows what is about to happen. Nobody can imagine that the thoughts inside this ordinary office will soon change the way humanity understands space, time, energy, and even reality itself. One quiet man, one quiet room, one extraordinary mind, and the universe is about to look completely different. Have you ever wondered how a person becomes a genius? Are great minds born different? Or are they simply curious enough to ask questions that everyone else is too busy to notice? Did you know that? The man many people call the greatest genius in history struggled to find work after university. Did you know he failed his university entrance exam on his first attempt? Did you know some teachers believed he would never become successful? It sounds impossible, but every one of those moments helped create the man we now know as Albert Einstein. Today, we are not just learning about science. We are exploring courage, curiosity, failure, persistence, and the incredible power of never giving up on your questions. Welcome to Story Speak English. Here, you improve your English naturally by listening to unforgettable true stories from history. As you follow today's story, you will hear useful vocabulary, natural sentence patterns, and clear pronunciation that can strengthen your listening skills without feeling like a traditional English lesson. So, relax. Listen carefully. Picture every scene inside your imagination. Because this is not simply the story of a scientist. This is the story of a boy who refused to stop asking why. And sometimes, one single question can change the entire world. Albert Einstein entered the world on March 14th, 1879. He was born in the quiet city of Ulm, inside the Kingdom of Württemberg, which was part of the German Empire. Nothing about that day suggested history had just changed. There were no newspaper headlines, no celebrations, no predictions. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Einstein, simply welcomed their first child into the family like millions of parents before them. His father worked with electrical equipment. His mother loved music and played the piano beautifully. Their home was comfortable but far from luxurious. They dreamed of giving their children a better future through education and hard work. When Albert was still very young, the family moved to Munich. The city was growing quickly. Factories were appearing everywhere. Electric lights were beginning to replace old lamps. Germany was becoming one of Europe's strongest industrial nations. Machines were changing the world. But inside one small apartment lived a little boy who seemed different. Albert was unusually quiet. Many children filled rooms with endless talking. Albert often preferred silence. He watched. He listened. He thought. His parents became worried because he spoke much later than most children. Some relatives whispered that perhaps something was wrong. Perhaps the boy was not very intelligent. Perhaps he would always struggle. Nobody knew that behind those quiet eyes, a remarkable mind was already beginning to observe the world in a completely different way. Albert liked to think before he spoke. Sometimes he quietly repeated sentences to himself before saying them aloud. Every word mattered. Every idea deserved careful thought. Years later, people would mistake this habit for shyness. But it was something deeper. His mind never stopped asking questions, even when his mouth remained silent. Then, one ordinary day, everything changed. Albert became sick. He had to stay in bed. His father wanted to cheer him up, so Hermann brought his young son a small magnetic compass. It looked simple, just a tiny needle trapped beneath glass. Albert held it in his hands. He turned it. The needle moved. He turned it again. The needle moved back. No matter how he twisted the compass, the needle always pointed north. Again, and again, and again. The young boy stared in amazement. He could not see anything touching the needle. No strings, no hands, no visible force. Yet, something invisible was controlling it. How? Why? What was hidden inside empty space? That tiny compass became one of the most important objects of his childhood. Years later, Einstein would remember that moment with great emotion. For the first time, he realized that invisible forces could shape the physical world. The universe was full of mysteries that human eyes could not see. That single moment planted a seed of endless curiosity. And curiosity became the engine of his entire life. As Albert grew older, another passion entered his world: music. His mother insisted that he learn the violin. At first, he disliked practicing. Like many children, he found it boring. But something unexpected happened. When he discovered the beautiful music of Mozart, everything changed. He no longer practiced because someone forced him. He played because he loved it. The violin became more than an instrument. It became a companion. Whenever life became difficult, whenever complicated problems filled his mind, Einstein often picked up his violin. Music helped him think. It helped him imagine. It helped him see patterns that words could never describe. Many years later, after solving difficult scientific problems, he would still celebrate by playing music. Science and music became two halves of the same soul. One explained the universe. The other helped him feel it. School, however, was another story. Albert entered a traditional German school built upon strict discipline. Students sat perfectly still. Teachers expected complete obedience. Questions were not encouraged. Memorization was rewarded. Independent thinking was often punished. For Albert, it felt like a prison. He hated repeating facts without understanding them. He wanted explanations. He wanted reasons. He wanted truth. Imagine sitting inside a classroom where asking, "Why?" annoys your teacher. Now imagine being a child whose favorite word is, "Why?" That was Albert. One day, He asked difficult questions. The next day, he challenged another explanation. Sometimes, his teachers became frustrated. One teacher reportedly told him that he would never amount to anything. Another believed his questioning disturbed the rest of the class. Albert respected knowledge, but he refused to respect ideas simply because an authority figure said they were true. He believed every idea should survive questioning, even if that idea came from a teacher, even if it came from a famous scientist, even if it came from himself. That attitude would later transform physics. But as a schoolboy, it mostly caused trouble. His classmates often followed the rules without complaint. Albert quietly walked in the opposite direction, not because he wanted attention, but because his mind demanded understanding before acceptance. Outside school, he found a different education. Books. Lots of books. He read mathematics for fun. While many teenagers struggled with basic equations, Albert explored advanced geometry, almost like a game. Numbers excited him. Patterns fascinated him. Instead of memorizing answers, he wanted to discover them. His curiosity became stronger every year. Meanwhile, life at home was becoming more difficult. His father's business began to fail. Money became tight. The family faced serious financial problems. Eventually, Hermann Einstein decided to leave Germany and move to northern Italy. Hoping for a fresh start, Albert remained behind for a while to finish school, but he felt lonely. He disliked the strict education system even more than before. Finally, he made a bold decision. He left school. Many people thought he had made a terrible mistake. Dropping out of a German high school sounded like the end of any successful future. Imagine telling people that one day the world's greatest scientist quit school before graduating. Most would laugh, but Albert had another plan. He wanted freedom. Freedom to learn differently. Freedom to think independently. Freedom to become himself. So he joined his family and left Germany behind. The move changed everything. Switzerland felt different, more open, more relaxed, more welcoming to independent thought. It matched Albert's personality much better. He decided he wanted to study at one of the country's finest scientific institutions, the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. Today, it is known as ETH Zurich and is respected around the world. There was only one problem. He was still very young. Confident in his mathematical ability, Albert took the entrance examination. He believed he was ready. The results surprised him. His mathematics and physics scores were outstanding. Extraordinary, in fact. But his marks in languages, history, literature, and several other subjects were not good enough. He had failed the overall examination. Imagine that moment. The future creator of the theory of relativity. Rejected. Many people would have accepted defeat. Albert did not. The school's director noticed something special. This young man clearly possessed exceptional talent in mathematics and physics. Instead of closing the door forever, he offered advice. Finish your general education first, then come back. Albert accepted the challenge. He enrolled in a school in the Swiss town of Aarau. The atmosphere could not have been more different from Germany. Teachers encouraged discussion. Students explored ideas freely. Curiosity was welcomed instead of punished. Albert loved it. For the first time, school felt exciting. Here he developed another habit that would shape his future: thought experiments. Instead of performing laboratory experiments with expensive equipment, he imagined impossible situations inside his mind. What would happen if you could ride beside a beam of light? Could you ever catch it? What would the universe look like? Most teenagers daydreamed about sports or adventures. Albert daydreamed about light itself. These strange mental journeys would one day revolutionize modern science. In Ibajolu, he successfully entered the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. Finally, he had reached the university he had dreamed about. His classmates quickly noticed that Albert was unusual. He loved physics with all his heart, but subjects that failed to interest him received very little attention. He skipped lectures, arrived late. Sometimes he simply studied alone instead. Many professors were not impressed. Albert respected ideas more than titles. If he believed he could learn something better from a book, he stayed home and read. It was a risky strategy, and sometimes it created serious problems. Fortunately, he had an extraordinary friend. His name was Marcel Grossmann. Marcel was organized, careful, responsible. He attended every lecture. He wrote beautiful notes, detailed notes, complete notes. While Albert chased ideas across the universe, Marcel quietly recorded everything the professors taught. When examination season arrived, Albert borrowed Marcel's notebooks. Those carefully written pages became priceless. Without Marcel's help, Einstein's university life might have ended very differently. Their friendship became one of the most important relationships of his early career. It also taught a valuable lesson. Even great geniuses sometimes succeed because good friends believe in them. Despite his brilliance, Albert continued frustrating many professors. He openly challenged ideas. He disliked following unnecessary rules. Some teachers admired his intelligence. Others found him difficult. One professor became so annoyed that he refused to recommend Albert for academic jobs after graduation. At the time, Albert probably did not realize how costly that would become. In Ichenjubite, he graduated. The future finally seemed close. He dreamed of becoming a university professor, teaching physics, conducting research, exploring the deepest mysteries of nature. Instead, reality struck hard. He applied for job after job. Rejection. Another rejection. Then another. Weeks became months. Months became years. Letters arrived. "We regret to inform you." Again, and again, and again, without recommendations from influential professors. Universities showed little interest. Albert struggled financially. Sometimes he accepted temporary work as a tutor. Sometimes there was no work at all. Imagine carrying extraordinary ideas inside your mind. Yet, nobody wants to hire you. His confidence was tested. His future looked uncertain. Many people would have abandoned their dreams. Albert refused. He continued reading, continued thinking, continued asking questions. Finally, in 1902, help arrived from an old friend. Marcel Grossman had not forgotten him. Marcel's father recommended Albert for a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. The job title sounded unimpressive. Third-class technical assistant. It was hardly the glamorous scientific career Albert had imagined. His responsibility was simple. Inventors submitted designs for new machines. Albert examined each application. He carefully studied every detail. Was the invention original? Would it work? Did it deserve legal protection? Day after day, page after page, machine after machine. At first glance, it seemed like the perfect place for dreams to die. But appearances can be wonderfully deceptive, because inside that quiet office, between stacks of technical papers, while reviewing other people's inventions, Albert Einstein quietly began inventing a new understanding of the universe itself. The patent office in Bern did not look like the birthplace of a scientific revolution. Every morning, Albert Einstein walked through its doors dressed like any ordinary government employee. There were no laboratories, no giant telescopes, no expensive scientific instruments. Only desks, documents, blueprints, ink, and endless paperwork. For most people, the work would have felt repetitive. Hours passed as Albert carefully examined one invention after another. A machine for measuring electricity, a new mechanical device, an improved communication system. Every application demanded patience. Every detail had to be checked. Every sentence had to be understood. Nothing could be rushed. His supervisors expected precision, and Albert gave them exactly that. He became known as a reliable employee. He finished his work carefully. He made clear decisions. He rarely caused problems inside the office. But once the official work was complete, something extraordinary happened. His real work began. While the city slowly settled into evening, Albert's imagination came alive. He returned home. A small apartment, simple furniture, very little money. But inside those ordinary walls lived ideas that would soon shake the foundations of science. He filled notebooks with equations, covered loose sheets of paper with calculations, crossed out mistakes, started again, worked late into the night. Sometimes until sunrise. Nobody paid him to do this. Nobody expected him to do it. There were no awards waiting, no television interviews, no worldwide fame. Only curiosity, pure curiosity. And that curiosity was stronger than exhaustion. During this time, Albert built a small circle of close friends who loved asking difficult questions almost as much as he did. They jokingly called themselves the Olympia Academy. The name sounded grand. In reality, it was simply a few friends gathering together to discuss books, philosophy, mathematics, and physics. They met in apartments, walked through the streets of Bern, shared simple meals, drank coffee, talked for hours. They debated the ideas of great thinkers: Isaac Newton, David Hume, Ernst Mach, Henry Poincaré. Every conversation pushed Albert's mind a little further. He did not simply want to know what previous scientists believed. He wanted to know whether they were right. One of his closest friends was Michel Bassot, patient, thoughtful, an excellent listener. Whenever Albert became stuck on a difficult problem, he often discussed it with Michel. Years later, Einstein would say that many important breakthroughs became possible because of those conversations. Sometimes the greatest discoveries begin not with expensive equipment, but with two friends asking each other honest questions. Life outside science also changed dramatically. In January 1903, Albert married Mileva Marishik. She had once been his classmate at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic. Like Albert, she loved mathematics and physics. Both dreamed of understanding nature through science. Their early years together were far from luxurious. Money remained limited. The apartment stayed modest. Some months were difficult. Bills had to be paid. Food had to be bought. Life demanded practical responsibilities. Soon, they welcomed their first son, Hans Albert. Albert was now more than a scientist, more than a patent clerk. He was a husband, a father, a provider. Imagine carrying all those responsibilities while secretly trying to solve the greatest mysteries in the universe. Most people would have chosen the safer path. Work, sleep, repeat. Albert chose something much harder. He protected time for impossible questions. He once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. At this point in his life, he was proving those words every single day. His greatest tool was not a machine. It was his mind. Again and again, he returned to one strange question. What would happen if I could travel beside a beam of light? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. You are moving faster and faster. The wind disappears. The world behind you becomes smaller. Ahead of you is a beam of light racing through space. Could you ever catch it? If you somehow reached the exact same speed, what would you see? Would the light stop moving? Would it freeze in front of your eyes? Or was something fundamentally wrong with the question itself? These thoughts may sound simple, but they created enormous problems. For more than 200 years, scientists had trusted Isaac Newton's picture of the universe. According to Newton, space and time were fixed, absolute, the same for everyone. It seemed perfectly reasonable. If two people looked at the same clock, they expected time to be identical. If two people measured the same distance, space remained unchanged. The universe behaved like a giant machine. Orderly, predictable, comfortable, but Albert noticed tiny cracks in that picture. Something did not fit. The laws describing electricity and magnetism suggested that light always traveled at exactly the same speed. Always, no matter who measured it. That sounded impossible. Common sense argued the opposite. Imagine standing on a train platform. A train rushes past. Now imagine throwing a ball forward while standing inside that moving train. Someone outside the train sees the speed of the train plus the speed of the ball. That makes perfect sense. So why should light behave differently? Why should its speed remain constant? The more Albert thought about this puzzle, the stranger the universe became. Most scientists tried adjusting old theories. Albert did something much bolder. He questioned the assumptions themselves. He asked a dangerous question. What if our understanding of space and time is wrong? History often celebrates answers. But history changes because someone first asks the right question. Albert refused to accept an explanation simply because respected scientists believed it. He wanted proof. Logic. Consistency. If the mathematics led somewhere surprising, he followed, even if that path challenged centuries of accepted knowledge. Night after night, his desk filled with paper, equations stretched across page after page. Mistakes appeared. He erased them, started again. More calculations, more thinking, more questions. His neighbors probably believed he was simply working hard. They could not see the revolution taking shape inside his mind. By 1905, Albert Einstein was only 26 years old, still unknown, still working at the patent office, still earning an ordinary government salary. Yet, inside his notebooks waited ideas unlike anything science had ever seen. Historians would later call 1905 his annus mirabilis, a Latin phrase meaning the miracle year. The name sounds dramatic, but it was fully deserved, because within a single year, Albert published 4 scientific papers. Not 1, not 2, 4. Each one extraordinary. Each one changing a different part of physics. Each one written by a man who still spent his mornings reviewing patent applications. The first paper examined light itself. For centuries, scientists argued about its true nature. Was light a wave or something else? Albert proposed an astonishing possibility. Sometimes, light behaved like tiny packets of energy. Today, we call them photons. This bold idea later helped explain the photoelectric effect. Many scientists initially rejected it. It seemed too strange, too radical. But decades later, experiments proved Einstein correct. Ironically, this work, not relativity, would eventually earn him the Nobel Prize. His second paper focused on something much smaller: tiny particles dancing inside liquids. Have you ever noticed dust floating through sunlight near a window? The particles seem to move randomly, tiny, restless, almost alive. Scientists had observed this strange motion for years. Albert explained it mathematically. Invisible atoms constantly collided with those particles, pushing them in unpredictable directions. Today, we call this Brownian motion. His explanation gave powerful evidence that atoms truly existed. At the time, surprisingly, not every scientist believed atoms were real. Albert's mathematics changed that debate forever. Then came the third paper, the one that transformed history: the special theory of relativity. Its title sounded calm, almost ordinary. Its consequences were anything but ordinary. Albert argued that the speed of light remains constant for every observer. Always. No exceptions. To make that possible, space and time themselves had to change. Imagine 2 people, one standing still, the other traveling close to the speed of light. According to Einstein, they would not experience time in exactly the same way. Time could slow down. Distances could shrink. Events that seemed simultaneous for one observer might not be simultaneous for another. The universe was no longer a fixed stage. It became flexible, dynamic, alive in ways nobody had imagined. At first, these ideas sounded unbelievable, even shocking. But Albert's equations were elegant, logical, beautifully consistent. Piece by piece, evidence would later prove them correct. Then, only a few months later, he published one final short paper, only a few pages long, simple, elegant, and perhaps the most famous equation in scientific history emerged from it. D equals mc squared. Just 5 symbols. Yet they revealed one of nature's deepest secrets. Matter and energy are not completely different things. They are connected. A tiny amount of matter contains an astonishing amount of energy. It was one of the most profound insights ever written on paper. Albert could not yet imagine how this equation would influence the 20th century. It would inspire new technologies, transform modern physics, and eventually become connected to one of humanity's darkest inventions. But that future was still hidden. For now, he remained an unknown patent clerk. He mailed his papers to scientific journals, then returned to work, reviewed more inventions, stamped more documents, walked home through the quiet streets of Bern. The world continued as if nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, everything had already changed. At first, almost nobody noticed. Albert Einstein had published ideas that challenged centuries of scientific thinking. Yet the world did not suddenly stop. There were no newspaper headlines announcing the birth of a genius. No crowds gathered outside his apartment. No universities rushed to offer him famous positions. Life continued exactly as before. The next morning, Albert walked into the patent office in Bern. He greeted his co-workers, sat down at his desk, picked up another stack of patent applications. The man who had just rewritten the laws of the universe still spent his days checking other people's inventions. History is often quieter than we imagine. The greatest revolutions do not always begin with applause. Sometimes they begin with silence. But silence does not last forever. Slowly, very slowly, scientists across Europe began reading the strange papers written by the unknown patent clerk. Many were confused. Some were fascinated. Others were deeply skeptical. One question echoed through laboratories and universities. Who is Albert Einstein? Among those who recognized the brilliance of his work was one of the greatest physicists of the age, Max Planck. Planck had already changed science through his own revolutionary ideas about energy. When he read Einstein's papers, he realized something extraordinary had arrived. Unlike many critics, Planck did not dismiss the young scientist simply because he was unknown. Instead, he studied the mathematics carefully. He understood its beauty, its elegance, its power. Soon, Planck began discussing Einstein's ideas with other physicists. That support became priceless. Sometimes all it takes is one respected person willing to say, "This young man deserves to be heard." Little by little, Einstein's name spread. Universities invited him to speak. Students became curious. Researchers debated his theories late into the night. Questions filled scientific journals. Letters arrived from around the world. The lonely patent clerk was no longer invisible. In 1909, something remarkable happened. Einstein finally left the patent office. After 7 years of balancing paperwork with revolutionary thinking, he accepted a position as a professor at the University of Zurich. The office that had once seemed like a prison had actually protected his imagination. There had been no pressure to publish endless academic papers, no demanding department meetings, no political battles inside universities. Just enough stability to allow his mind to wander freely. Sometimes, the path that looks like a detour becomes the road that changes your life. Albert quickly became known as a different kind of professor. He rarely acted like a traditional academic. His lectures were filled with enthusiasm instead of arrogance. He encouraged students to think independently. He welcomed difficult questions. In fact, he often smiled when someone challenged his ideas. For Einstein, science was not about winning arguments. It was about discovering truth. Titles did not impress him. Curiosity did. His appearance also became increasingly unusual. His hair grew longer. His clothes remained simple. He often forgot everyday things. Friends joked that Einstein could become completely absorbed in a scientific problem while forgetting where he had placed his hat. Some stories about his absent-mindedness became legendary. Whether every story was true hardly mattered. They reflected something real. His attention lived inside ideas. The ordinary details of daily life seemed far less important. But Einstein was far from finished. Special relativity had transformed physics. Yet one enormous mystery remained: gravity. For more than 200 years, Isaac Newton's explanation had dominated science. According to Newton, gravity was an invisible force pulling objects toward one another. It explained why apples fell from trees, why the moon circled Earth, why planets moved around the sun. The theory worked beautifully. But Einstein believed there was a deeper explanation. Once again, everything began with a simple question. Imagine standing inside an elevator. Suddenly, the cables snap. The elevator begins falling. Inside, for a brief moment, everything seems weightless. You float. Objects beside you float. Could gravity and acceleration somehow be connected? Most people would dismiss such a strange thought. Einstein could not stop thinking about it. For years, he struggled. This was far more difficult than special relativity. Sometimes he believed he was close. Then he discovered mistakes. Months of work disappeared. New mathematics had to be learned. Entire notebooks filled with calculations. Friends watched him wrestle with problems that seemed impossible. He later admitted these were among the hardest years of his scientific life. Fortunately, an old friend returned to help him once again. Marcel Grossmann, the careful student whose lecture notes had rescued Einstein years earlier. Now Marcel contributed something even more valuable: advanced mathematics. Einstein realized he needed powerful new mathematical tools to describe gravity correctly. Grossmann introduced him to the complex geometry developed by mathematicians. Together, They explored equations unlike anything Einstein had used before. The friendship that began inside a university classroom continued changing history. Finally, in November 1915, after nearly a decade of relentless effort, Einstein presented the general theory of relativity. It was breathtaking. Gravity was no longer simply a force pulling objects together. Instead, mass and energy bent the very fabric of space and time. Imagine placing a heavy bowling ball onto a stretched rubber sheet. The sheet curves downward. Now place a smaller marble nearby. The marble rolls toward the larger ball, not because the larger ball is pulling it directly, but because the surface beneath it has changed shape. Einstein believed the universe worked in a similar way. The sun bends space-time. Earth simply follows that curved path. The idea sounded almost unbelievable. Yet, the mathematics was astonishingly beautiful. If general relativity proved correct, it would become one of the greatest scientific achievements in history. But beautiful mathematics alone was not enough. Science demands evidence. Predictions, experiments, tests. Fortunately, Einstein's theory made a bold prediction. Light itself should bend when passing near a massive object like the sun. Think about that for a moment. Light has no weight. Yet Einstein argued gravity could still change its path because gravity reshaped space itself. It sounded impossible. There was only one way to know. Observe a total solar eclipse. During an eclipse, the moon blocks the sun's bright light. Stars near the sun become briefly visible. If Einstein was correct, those stars would appear slightly out of position because their light had bent while passing the sun. Astronomers prepared carefully. Then, history intervened. World War I erupted. Europe descended into violence. Millions of lives were shattered. Scientific cooperation became almost impossible. While nations fought one another, Einstein remained deeply committed to peace. He opposed war. He believed violence solved very little. Many people criticized him for those beliefs, but he refused to abandon them. Even during humanity's darkest moments, he continued searching for understanding instead of hatred. Finally, in 1919, the opportunity arrived. British astronomer Arthur Eddington led an expedition to observe a total solar eclipse. Teams traveled thousands of kilometers. Equipment was carefully prepared. Everything depended on clear skies. Clouds could destroy years of planning. The eclipse began. Photographs were taken. Measurements followed. Weeks later, the results became clear. The stars appeared exactly where Einstein's theory predicted. Light had bent. General relativity had passed its greatest test. The news exploded across the world. Newspapers printed enormous headlines. Revolution in science. Newton's ideas overthrown. New theory of the universe. Almost overnight, Albert Einstein became the most famous scientist on Earth. His face appeared on magazine covers. Journalists chased him through train stations. Crowds gathered wherever he traveled. Universities competed to invite him. Kings, presidents, artists, writers, ordinary citizens. Everyone wanted to meet the man who who had changed humanity's picture of the universe. Yet fame never became his true goal. He still cared most about understanding nature. He often spoke with warmth, laughed easily, played his beloved violin, and continued asking questions. Always another question, always another mystery. Then, in 1921, another great honor arrived. Albert Einstein received the Nobel Prize in Physics. Interestingly, he did not receive it for relativity. Many members of the Nobel Committee still considered relativity too controversial. Instead, the prize recognized his explanation of the photoelectric effect, work that helped lay the foundation for modern quantum physics. That discovery would eventually make technologies like solar panels, digital cameras, and countless electronic devices possible. Einstein accepted the honor with humility. Awards pleased him, but they did not define him. For him, the greatest reward remained the same as when he was a curious little boy, holding a magnetic compass to understand something that had once been a mystery. By the early E-Tintio by Archimel, Albert Einstein had become far more than a scientist. He had become a symbol of curiosity, of imagination, of fearless questioning. The quiet child who spoke late, the rebellious student who challenged teachers, the struggling graduate rejected by universities, the unknown patent clerk working ordinary office hours, had become one of the most recognizable people on Earth. But life was about to become far more complicated, because while Einstein searched for the secrets of the universe, the world around him was changing in dangerous ways. Political hatred was growing, extremism was spreading, and within only a few years, the greatest scientific mind of the 20th century would face one of the greatest moral challenges of his life. The 1920s were a time of celebration for Albert Einstein. He traveled across Europe, America, and Asia. Everywhere he went, enormous crowds gathered. People waited for hours just to catch a glimpse of the man with the wild white hair. Children asked for his autograph. Journalists followed his every step. Scientists hoped to shake his hand. To many people, Einstein had become more than a physicist. He had become the face of human intelligence itself. But behind the applause, dark clouds were beginning to gather over Europe. Germany was changing. After the First World War, the country suffered from economic collapse, political violence, and deep social unrest. Many people were angry. Many searched for someone to blame. Extremist political groups used fear and hatred to gain power. Among them was a man named Adolf Hitler. Hitler promised strength. He promised national pride. But he also spread dangerous lies. He blamed Jewish people for Germany's problems. Albert Einstein was Jewish. His fame made him an easy target. Newspapers controlled by the Nazis attacked him. His books were criticized. His scientific work was mocked. Some extremists even called his discoveries Jewish science. Imagine dedicating your life to understanding the universe, only to be hated because of your identity. Einstein saw the danger long before many others did. He believed that hatred, if left unchallenged, would eventually destroy freedom. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Einstein was traveling abroad when he heard the news. He understood immediately that returning home would be dangerous. He made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He would never live in Germany again. Soon after, Nazi supporters searched his home. His property was taken. His bank accounts were seized. His books were burned in public. Imagine watching your life's work thrown into flames simply because a government fears ideas. Einstein did not answer hatred with hatred. Instead, he searched for a new beginning. That new beginning came in the United States. He accepted a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Unlike a normal university, the institute allowed scholars to focus almost entirely on research. There were no large teaching schedules, no endless administrative meetings, only time to think, to explore, to discover. Princeton soon became Einstein's home for the rest of his life. Every morning, local residents smiled as they watched the famous scientist walk to work. He often wore an old sweater. Sometimes he forgot to wear socks. His hair became even wilder. He looked nothing like the image people expected of a world-famous genius. Children were not afraid of him. They waved. He waved back. He loved simple conversations. He enjoyed sailing, although friends joked that he was not a very skilled sailor. He continued playing his violin. Music remained one of his greatest joys. Despite worldwide fame, Einstein lived surprisingly simply. He cared little about expensive clothes. He cared little about luxury. Ideas mattered more than possessions. Then came one of the greatest moral dilemmas of his life. Einstein was a committed pacifist. He believed war caused terrible suffering. But by the late 1930s, another frightening possibility appeared. Scientists discovered that splitting atoms released enormous amounts of energy. Einstein immediately understood what that could mean. If Nazi Germany developed an atomic bomb first, the consequences could be catastrophic. In 1939, encouraged by other physicists, Einstein signed a letter addressed to Franklin D. Roosevelt. The letter warned that Germany might be working on nuclear weapons. It urged the United States to begin serious research before it was too late. That letter helped inspire what later became the Manhattan Project. Ironically, Einstein himself never worked on the project. The American government considered him a security risk because of his political views and denied him access to the secret program. Years later, in 1945, the world witnessed something unimaginable. Atomic bombs destroyed the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost or forever changed. Einstein was deeply saddened. Although his famous equation, E=mc, described the relationship between matter and energy, he had not designed the bomb. Still, he felt a heavy moral responsibility. He later devoted much of his life to promoting peace, international cooperation, and nuclear disarmament. He often warned humanity that scientific progress without wisdom could become dangerous. He believed our technology had advanced faster than our compassion. His words remain powerful today. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Those words reflected his entire life. Curiosity had guided him from childhood. Curiosity had transformed science. But curiosity, he believed, must always be joined with kindness and responsibility. Einstein also spoke passionately about civil rights. After moving to America, he openly opposed racism. He supported equality and believed every human being deserved dignity and respect. At a time when many influential people remained silent, Einstein chose to speak. For him, justice was not separate from science. Both required honesty. Both required courage. As the years passed, Einstein continued searching for what he called a unified field theory. He dreamed of discovering one elegant set of equations, capable of explaining every force in nature. Day after day, he filled notebooks with calculations. But this final dream remained beyond reach. Even the greatest minds cannot solve every mystery. And perhaps that is one of the most inspiring lessons of all. Real scientists are not people who know every answer. They are people brave enough to keep asking questions. In 1952, something extraordinary happened. After the death of Chaim Weizmann, the government of Israel offered Einstein the presidency. Imagine that. One of the world's greatest scientists was invited to become the leader of a nation. Einstein politely declined. He explained that he lacked the experience and personality required for political leadership. He believed he could serve humanity better through ideas than through political office. It was a humble decision, one that reflected his lifelong character. On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away in Princeton at the age of 76. The world mourned. Scientists lost a brilliant colleague. Students lost an inspiring teacher. Humanity lost one of its greatest thinkers. Yet his influence did not end. In many ways, it was only beginning. Today, Einstein's theories help guide satellites orbiting Earth. Without corrections based on relativity, GPS navigation would become inaccurate. His work helped shape modern cosmology, explaining black holes, gravitational waves, and the expanding universe. His discoveries continue to influence medicine, engineering, electronics, space exploration, and technologies that millions of people use every day. More importantly, his life teaches us lessons that reach far beyond science. He reminds us that failure is not the end. Remember, he failed his first university entrance examination. He struggled to find work after graduation. He spent years in an ordinary office while dreaming extraordinary dreams. He questioned accepted ideas when others remained silent. He never allowed criticism to silence his curiosity, and he never stopped learning. Albert Einstein once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." Whether or not he truly had no special talent is impossible to believe. But his second statement contains a timeless truth. Passionate curiosity can change a life. It can change a career. It can even change the world. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of Einstein's journey. The universe does not reveal its secrets to the loudest voice. It reveals them to the person who keeps asking gentle, patient, courageous questions. Thank you for listening to this story on Story Speak English. Every great story you hear improves not only your knowledge, but also your English listening, vocabulary, and pronunciation. If this story inspired you, continue learning with us by exploring more remarkable lives from history, because every great story teaches us something new, and every new word brings you one step closer to speaking English with confidence. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop asking why.